Hello, everybody. Welcome to Witch's Movie Coven. Tonight, we are super excited. Well, at least some of us are super excited to be talking about tonight's film. We are going to be doing the 1988 Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which we will talk about in just a moment. But before we get into that much further, I am one of your hosts. Patty is off on adventures, and so is Ms. Heather Green. So I am Richard Lale. Richard Lale is one name, not two. If I were just Richard, I'd be a... That's right. And so let's go around. We have the lovely Courtney Buckley. Lovely.
That's me. I'm Courtney Buckley, Ghost Bait on Scared and Alone, and this is the imposter Black Phillip. You know that because he doesn't have a butthole. This is modest Black Phillip. Because Heather Green on her adventures this week, I got to see her, and I, as everyone knows, refused to send her my Black Phillip in the mail to have his butthole fixed, which is now half a body. So I brought him to her, and there he is. And now he's on adventures with Heather Green, and he's wearing a diaper, and he's smelling the pretty flowers. I'm so proud of him. And he's reading books, and that's what he's reading.
Wow. He's smarter than I am.
He really is. He's so smart. He loves literature. And this, I love him just a little bit less, but this is his imposter cousin, Black Phil Lip with an extra L from Los Angeles. So he's in disguise.
He's lovely. He is lovely. Welcome, Black Phillip with an extra L. Hello, hello, welcome. And speaking of welcomes, we have the one and only, the golden child himself, the best hair in the entire coven. We have Mr. Jason Menke. Jason.
I'm Jason Menke. I write a lot of books. I've written 9 books for Llewellyn worldwide over the last 8 years. And my next book will be out in May of 2025, which is a lifetime away because publishing is really slow. Do you know what's not slow? This movie coven, because we do a new movie every week.
We do a new movie every week, but we don't always have the lovely Gwion. But this week we certainly do. Hello, Gwion. Why don't you?
Hello. How are you, Richard Leal? It's so lovely to be back.
We are honored to have you back, and front and side to side.
Thank you. I did not bring a faux Black Phillip this week. I brought some Altoids.
Equally as important.
Always be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's marvelous to be prepared. I think that's quite marvelous.
Can I ask Gwion Raven if anything good happened to him today?
All right, so we will just diverge from the world of movies and magic and the occult and step into some very practical magic. As you know, I'm from England. You may or may not know there is a big football tournament going on right now in Europe called the Euros, and England defeated the Netherlands today and are, in fact, in the final. We have one more game to go. It makes me a very, very happy boy, as opposed to a very grumpy old man if they had lost today, and then I would have poo-pooed this movie mightily.
I was really worried about the show. I was super worried about the show.
Speaking of magic, Courtney, you went to go see a concert.
Oh boy. Speaking of magic is right. So I got to see Joan Jett and Alanis Morissette, and it was a wild turn of events. We got stuck in traffic. We made it just in time to hear all of Joan Jett's best songs. She was opening for Alanis. But I've shared with the coven before that I had kind of a rough childhood, and Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill was one of the first CDs I ever got, and I was very angry when I was a kid because my life was hard. And listening to her music was the first time that I really connected to music because it let me feel that anger and like work it out somehow. And so it's always held a special place in my heart. But seeing her live on stage, and we were so close to the stage, and like feeling her voice reverberating in my chest while she sang, and like scream singing and crying right along with her, healed a part of my inner child that I did not know still needed to be healed. And it was like, just words cannot describe it. I've never experienced live music that made me feel the way that did. So that was yesterday.
Spectacular.
That is lovely. Music is, of course, a powerful tool that helps to tell stories. It helps us to connect with emotions. And I have a little personal story about Joan Jett. Many years ago, actually, before I go into Joan Jett, I will have to tell you this. So I am going to date myself. I'm going to say this. I saw Queen, not live on stage, but dead. I saw Queen dead. Is it too soon? Anyway, I saw Freddie Mercury he was dead. But I played Freddie Mercury, and there was a Joan Jett impersonator at this casino where I was under the employ. And Joan Jett gets on stage and she sings, "I love rock and roll." Classic song, right? Everyone knows that song. And so I made a joke which offended the Celine Dion. And the joke was, "I love and balls." I'm going to let your imagination take over wherever it will. Anyway, that was a long time ago. With that, let us get into the magic of movies.
So you love docks? Who cares? I mean, a lot of
Right?
people enjoy
What?
I mean, there's a
You
whole
like
song
clocks?
about sitting on the dock of the bay. I mean, it's cool.
It is
Sitting on a dock. Nice.
okay. That made me turn the color of my coat. So we are discussing today's film is the 1988 The Adventures of Baron Munchausen with Terry Gilliam, of course. Now this is Witches Movie Coven, and there is not a witch in this film. I'm sorry, spoiler alert, there is not a witch. However, I think that there is a lot of other magic that I think constitutes as some form of witchery. With that, normally the lovely and alluring Ms. Patty Negri would be here to say, "And Richard Lale, you're going to give us an unbiased synopsis." Well, she's not here to say that, so I will give a biased synopsis. See,
Wow.
I know you didn't expect that one. My biased synopsis is, this is a magical story surrounding the Baron Munchausen, whom, by the way, was based off of a real Baron Munchausen who lived in Germany, and he fought the Prussians, and he lent his name not only to the fictitious Baron Munchausen, he also lent his name to a syndrome, Munchausen by proxy, which is to say about when one tells tall tales and specifically harms another person. However, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, 1988, is the most watched version of all 20 versions that are out there, the earliest being 1909, Georges Millet, and then, of course, with direct lineage to the one from Germany. That was the most visually beautiful film. However, it had its troubles because it was, of course, funded by Joseph Goebbels. And that's not, we're not going to talk about that film. We're not going to talk about that film. We are not going to talk about that film. We are going to talk about the 1988 Terry Gilliam film. So in this story, the Baron shows up at this town, Venice, which is being attacked by the Turks. And they're trying to have this theatrical production of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, because by this point he is a hero, at least in his own mind. And the real Baron shows up under the siege of all of this war that is raging outside. And so the Baron, of course, says that the show that they are performing is not the way that it actually happens. And in his sort of madness or his psychosis, he thinks that these actors on stage are the people who he had known in his adventures. And so in order to save Venice from the attacks, he takes this little girl who is the daughter of the director, and they go off on this adventure to find the mates, his friends, so that they can stop the siege. And he talks about, he meets the Sultan, and of course the Sultan wanted him to take the pick of his harem, as he so says. And then it talks about the story as to what has happened and why the Sultan is angry. And it was because the Baron tricked the Sultan into stealing the entire treasury save one coin. Long story short, in that, the Baron goes to the moon where he meets the king and queen of the moon, which, of course, the king is the one and only, the incomparable Robin Williams, who has a severed head, and he is able to go off and do kingly things while his body cavorts with the queen and tickles her feet. That's, sitting on the dock of the bay and all of that. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. With that, of course, he finds all of his friends. He ends up by going under the water, and they're all old. They're all old. Now, the Baron's age, it varies somewhere between 40 and 80. I don't know. It just happens because he is a magical being. And of course, he meets the Vulcan, and he meets the wife, which is, of course, Venus. And they come back, and everyone, the little girl is saying, we have to go save the town. We have to go save the town. We have to save the town. And the Baron says, oh, we're not, the town is perfectly safe. The town is perfectly safe. Nothing is happening in the town. The town has already been saved. When in reality, COVID was real and 30 million, however many million people died. I mean, meanwhile, the town was actually under siege. With that, the Baron does die. He meets death for the final time, and they host his funeral, only to find out that, in fact, that is not actually what is happening, and that it is the Baron telling another one of his tall tales, and he lives another day to be the hero. What this film, however, what every film adaptation of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen misses, is about 50% of the book, most of which are hunting expeditions and driving a giant snail shell across the world and killing 300 polar bears and killing an alligator. So there's much of it that is missing out of the book, but it is perfectly acceptable because it is such a beautiful film. And the way that you see the stagecraft in the late 18th century is historically accurate, and it's beautiful. With that, who would like to go next? Normally, I guess we'd go to Heather Green to give a little history, but she isn't here. Maybe I can give a little more history. Maybe I should give a little more history. So I wanted to actually talk a little bit about the book of the Baron Munchausen. In this book, it is one of my favorites. And yes, he tells all of these tall tales. What the book sort of goes into is why this man tells these tall tales. And it ends with the very final paragraph of the book. And he's met the king and queen of the moon, and he has traversed the globe, and he has met with underworld gods and goddesses, and of course he's a philanderer, pleasant ladies, lovely ladies. But in the very final paragraph, the veil slips away. And in 1789, the Baron has discussed the reason that he has told all these tall tales is to relieve his guilt. And that is here. It says, all of the noble of France, like thee, we should never have been brought to this. This is again during the French Revolution. And he says, I bade the lovely creature to dry her eyes, and with the king and the dauphin ascended my carriage and drive post to Montmedy, as not an instant was to be lost. They took my advice and drove away, I conveyed them within a few miles of Montmedy, when the king, thanking me for my assistance, hoped that I would not trouble myself any further, as he was then, he presumed, out of danger. And the queen also, with tears in her eyes, thanked me on her knees, and presented the Dauphin for my blessing. In short, I left the king eating a mutton chop. I advised him not to delay, or he would certainly be taken, and setting spurs to my horse, wished them a good evening, and returned to England. The king remained too long at the table, and was taken. It was not my fault. So, those of you who do know history, when the blood rain happened, the French Revolution, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were bound to go to Austria. They were trying to flee across the border so that they would escape the blood rain. And the king got hungry. He did. He just got hungry. He thought he was out of danger, and he got hungry. And they stopped at a tavern and paid with a coin with his face on it. He was arrested immediately and brought back to Paris, and he was, of course, executed because it was by one vote. One vote. All of those tourists who were just visiting Versailles decided that they would hang Mike Pence with one vote. Anyway, neither here nor there. Let us get into the actual film. Who would like to go next? Jason Mankey does.
I always like to do a little research on these films, and this was a colossal box office bomb when it came out. It has a budget of, they say, $42 million, though Terry Gilliam has said it was a little less than that, and it made $8 or $9 million at the box office. Apparently, Columbia Pictures went through a change in management, and the new management was not excited about this film and wanted to make sure the bad management looked as awful as possible. Only made 100 prints of the film when it was released, which is a very small number, even back in the 80s. So it was in and out of theaters in just a matter of weeks and made almost no money, and probably hurt Terry Gilliam's career there for a while, because everyone said it did poorly despite being very well reviewed. So a little interesting background. I think we're both trying to take over for Heather. So we've done two things. We'll all have to do another couple of things to get to 5 things about it. This was so not in the theater that I didn't even realize it came out when I was a kid. I saw Time Bandits, which is another Terry Gilliam film, in a movie theater. The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen was sort of like this weird legend that I heard of much later, and was not sure even what it was or that it was a Terry Gilliam film. And I had not even seen it until today when I watched it before and after England's win in the Euro Cup. So it was all new to me. I completely missed it the first time around.
I did not get to see it in the theater myself in 1988, but with that said, I didn't actually get to go much to the cinema because my parents were evangelical and movies were of the devil.
My parents wanted to be rid of me. So, kids, off to the theater with you for 3 hours of bliss at home, away from our children.
Yeah. May I jump in?
I was hoping you would. I was about to go to you.
Oh, thank you. So, everybody so far has waxed exceedingly poetic about this movie. And I like this movie, but I think it's important to say it's bonkers. It's utterly bonkers. And I believe Colin has said it's a great cure for insomnia. I must admit, I've watched the movie several times, and there are bits where I'm like, oh my God, wake me up, wake me up. However, everything I love about this movie, which I do, has nothing to do with the actual movie. How's that for a paradox on the bay?
What do you actually love about it then?
Well, so I think this is part of a a 4-part series by Terry Gilliam. And all of these movies, the ones that I'm about to name, all have a really similar thread. They have several similar threads. So there's Time Bandits. There's this movie, of course, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. There's Brazil. And then there is The Fisher King. In many of those movies, there are several of the same actors. All 4 of those movies deal with the ridiculous rules of society. Preposterous, ridiculous rules. There's an amazing scene in this movie right at the beginning where the actor John Pryce, who plays sort of the town official, the town bureaucrat, he is the chief of the DMV, right? Like he's just a bureaucrat. And this soldier comes in, who happens to be Sting, by the way. It's a cameo by Sting. He comes in and they praise this soldier. Wait, is this the soldier that saved the village? Yes. Is this the soldier that went beyond the call of duty? Yes. Is this the soldier that saved all of his men? Yes. Execute him. And everyone's looking around going, what? It's like, well, we can't have somebody showing extraordinary valor. That would make everybody else feel bad. So they execute the best soldier because it would make everybody else feel bad. I love that topsy-turvy reality. Who says he got to make the changes? If you watch Time Bandits, it's about going in and out of reality. If you watch The Fisher King with Robin Williams, you watch that movie and it's about this man, for a variety of reasons, who goes in and out of reality. And Brazil is as bonkers as this movie, right? It's all about that. But in every case, it's this forced bureaucracy that is normal, which is absolutely bonkers in itself. And the characters, in this case, Baron Munchausen, bucks the system, as do the other characters in some of the other movies, completely bucks the system. And here's what I think. The John Pryce character, the bureaucrat, who's similar characters in the other 3 movies, they are the enforcers of the mad reality. And I think about that today, in today's world, the things we are being told. The earth is flat. No, it's not. We are being told a great number of idiotic lies about the nature of reality. And there are these arbiters that are out executing the brilliant soldiers, so to speak, the folks that are standing up for truth and for science and for justice. They're being executed and being told they're the mad ones. And then, Baron Munchausen comes in and through the most ridiculous, bonkers, ridiculous making out with the Queen of the Moon and going to see the god Vulcan and making out with Uma Thurman as Aphrodite or Venus. He's the one that actually goes on the adventure. He actually does something to buck the trend. So that's what I love about the movie. The movie itself, man, it's 2 hours you won't ever get back. But what it stands for, I think, is brilliant and really prescient. So there you go.
It's so funny because it is bonkers, as you so aptly said. It is so bizarre, but I tell you, it is one of my comfort films.
Yeah,
and I watch it periodically throughout the year, several times. I just love it. I love the 18th century, and I love the Baron, and the original, the real Baron, the real German Baron Munchausen was none too happy that someone had taken his name and rank, his title. He was so furious. But the funny thing about the real Baron Munchausen is that he himself attended parties and would say, oh, I went to the King and Queen of the Moon once. And of course, you're in 1760. No one has gone to the moon in 1760. And so everyone sort of laughs at him for being sort of this buffoon, but it inspires the art that is the Baron. And if you read the words, if you read the book, I encourage everyone to read the book, because yes, there is some violence. Yes, there is some cruelty. Yes, there is animal cruelty, which I don't like, but it's much more cohesive than the film itself. And like I said, there are 20 versions of The Adventures of Baron Munchausen beginning from 1909. With that, I actually want to show a painting that I did. If our producer will show this painting. There we go. This is in my tarot deck. This is my Fool card.
I love
Because in the tarot, the Fool represents sort of the possibility of everything. And with the Baron, everything is possible. Everything is, even the impossible is possible. Even, riding his horse underwater. So this is the Fool. He is out on his journey and everything just sort of happens. And if it doesn't suit him, then he sort of tells the story until it does. And I love the Baron. I cannot say how much I love the Baron.
I thought that was a picture initially when you showed it. I thought that was a picture. There is a painting in the movie that shows him, and I thought for sure this was a still from the movie at first. That's a beautiful piece of art.
Thank you very much. Actually, I didn't share it, but my sun card is based off of the destructed theater in this Venetian town, because you've got the sun that's floating around and all of these sort of mortar fires destroying the walls. And the sun, to me, represents the theater of life. And so when you have sort of the masquerade and the encompassing all of the actions that are life, it's theater. It's not necessarily reality. Everything is seen, but is that real?
Yeah.
And Courtney, you did not get a chance to watch this film, did you?
Well, I watched some of it. My internet was not cooperating with me, and so I was watching it in like 5, 4, 3-minute increments and then it would buffer, and then I would have to watch it again. So at first I was like, I got like Monty Python vibes from it, so I was really excited to like sit and watch it, because there were a few like one-liners in the beginning that like kind of caught my attention.
I mean,
and then I was
Killing Tree, mind you.
It's what?
It's no Killing Tree. It's no masterpiece like
nothing is. So I don't hold things to that standard, because nothing will ever reach that. That would be impossible. But I was worried at first that like the bits and pieces, like the way I was watching it was interrupting my understanding of it, and I could tell that there was symbolism. Like I could look at something and understand that like it was supposed to be symbolism, but I wasn't getting what it was supposed to be symbolizing. So I don't know if it was just my viewing experience or what, but there was pieces of it that I loved. It was funny. It made me laugh, the parts that I saw, but I did not. I wish that I had watched whatever you guys were just talking about, because listening to you guys talk about it is great, and watching it was not for me.
Terry Gilliam movies are vignettes. They're not like put together movies. There's a scene, and then there's another scene, and they're kind of connected, and they're kind of not connected all at the same time. I don't think he's a particularly great storyteller sometimes, because of the choppiness of all of these films. And this one reminds me a lot of Time Bandits, because it has that same structure where you're dropping into a story, and then you drop into the next story, and then it's not really completed in a satisfactory way sometimes, but you're still going to be dropped into the next story. And sometimes it annoys you a little bit, because you wanted to spend maybe more time with Uma Thurman as Venus, because who doesn't want to spend more time with Uma Thurman as Venus?
And my ADHD, my particular brand of ADHD, sometimes loves that and sometimes cannot function when that's happening in front of me. So I think today was the day. Maybe I'm just tired because I watched the concert last night or whatever, but my ADHD was like 90 HDing, and I could not follow the bits and pieces that I was able to see.
A movie that I find that's kind of analogous to this movie, and I think it's in the same genre. I don't know if it's from the same time period as far as being written, but as far as time period of the movie, it's of the story, it's the same, I think, is Gulliver's Travels.
Oh,
Right.
I love Gulliver's
Yep.
Travel.
Right. It's got that same, if you ever read or saw that, Courtney, that idea of traveling through strange worlds in fanciful crafts and meeting people that were very small and really big. Yeah, Big Fish.
I loved
is
Big
another
Fish.
movie that's like that. It's a story of tall tales, but encoded in the movie is this backdrop of political intrigue, which I find quite amazing.
And we have to think too, Jason Menke was saying that Gulliver's Travels is 1726. The
Excellent.
18th century was known as the Age of Enlightenment.
Mhm.
And it was sort of this peculiar time period because on one hand, they wanted art and everything was sort of gilt, and it was Rococo and Baroque and all kinds of sort of, and even the music and the clothing and everything matched it. You know, when you think of classical music and you've got that sort of Baroque sound, it's just so. In the 18th century, they were saying, well, I don't know that I actually believe in the literal versions of religions. Maybe there might be a Gnostic view or an agnostic view in some cases, and they were experimenting with science, and there was invention, and it was sort of it was the future, even though it's now 200 and 300 years ago. It was the future. And so that was what inspired a lot of the 19th century science fiction novels, as well as what inspired the 20th century science fiction films. It was the 18th century, the Age of Enlightenment. When you've got automatons, robots, which make an appearance, Robin Williams' three-headed bird is an automaton. It's got cogs and gears, and that was a whole genre that happened in the 80s as well, with that what they called steampunk, even though it makes me cringe.
Yeah.
So the 18th century was, I think we failed to give them the credit that they actually deserve. They were not as primitive as people would like to paint them to be.
Yeah. There's this interesting dichotomy, though, right? And I find this, so we mentioned John Cleese earlier on, and Python are always going to be kind of connected to movies like this because of Gilliam. But John Cleese gives an amazing speech. I'm sure many of you have seen it, about creativity. And if you haven't, go into the various places you consume such things and type in John Cleese creativity. But part of what I love about this movie, again, the absurdity is certainly one thing. But again, this bureaucrat character that wants to manufacture life. And there's even a suggestion at the end of the movie that the war itself was even manufactured by him, and that they were never really in any danger anyway, which is kind of interesting, just to sort of, in that very kind of 1984 George Orwell, you know, we're at war with Eurasia, we've never been at war with Eurasia kind of, paradox there. But there's this lovely thing where it is the age of reason. It is a place of logic and bureaucracy. And I think the Baron brings in this very absolute need for fantasy and storytelling. And, you know, life is shit a lot of the time. Let's face it. I love life. It's beautiful, and it's absolutely terrible as well. And I think we get so caught up in, you know, the 9 to 5 of it all, and the bill paying and the adulting and the I've got to build my personal brand on whatever social media, all of that, that we sometimes forget about the fantasy and the joy and the, yes, I went to the moon. Why not? I love that. I love it. And I really think that's one of the purposes of magic. This is a really big curve back to what you started with. No, there aren't any witches in this movie, Richard Lale, but there is magic in this movie. If you dream it, it can be. If you tell the stories, the fact that he cheats death so many times and really becomes a friend of death, you know, in an interesting kind of way. Absolutely. Yeah. Bogged down in the mundane, Colin. That's exactly it. And I think what this movie does is completely blows that up. Mortar shells and all.
And I do also love the fact too, in a magical sort of point, is that Aphrodite or Venus is a goddess that is still honored and worshipped across the world. People may not know as much about Vulcan, maybe they do, but the king and queen of the moon, they are certainly honored more so, the goddess of the moon. So of course, why, if there's a man of the moon, why wouldn't there be a queen of the moon? Why not? And I really sort of, I really appreciated that. And then to even go back even more, one of my favorite operas is the Marriage of Figaro, Mozart, which was, of course, banned across Europe because it was painting the dignitaries in a light that they didn't like, and so I go back to the opera, I go back to the theater, and I the way that they're using the physicality of their bodies to make the waves and to move the sun and to lower the scrims, and it was that, as an actor, as a theater geek myself, that to me is the magic. Because when we're seeing it in cinema form, when we're seeing cinematography, we sort of lose the stagecraft. And if anyone gets a chance to go to the opera, if you don't even like opera, go to the opera. However, I did see Cinderella in New York at the Met, and it was awful. Never mind, that's another story. Speaking of the 18th century, it was awful. But when you look at the stagecraft and the way that things maneuver around the stage, and the costuming, and all of the sort of the rehearsals that have to go into it, and the fine tuning, and then these actors are on stage trying desperately to entertain an audience who is being fired at with mortar shells, and the theater is crumbling about around them, and the show must go on, to quote Freddie Mercury. The show must go on, and no matter what is happening, even when the real Baron shows up, they try so hard to continue the show. So I understand that.
A side story for you, Richard Leal, which you might find interesting. So about 1,000 years ago, I was in a Gilbert and Sullivan show, and it was in a very, very old theatre in England, and they used I would call them drums. So there's this great scene in the movie at the beginning where the actor who's playing the acted version of the Baron, as opposed to the real Baron, is on a ship, and he's going across the ocean. And there's this stagecraft where they use these tumblers to show the motion. And we actually had tumblers like that. It was purposely set to look like one of those plays. But the mechanics of those things are amazing. As many actors as you see on the stage, there's 10 times as many people backstage pulling levers and moving things and rolling tumblers. Absolutely stunning stagecraft.
It's so brilliant. Again, the age of enlightenment. It looks like magic, but it really wasn't.
Mm-hmm. I sometimes really like watching these older films that existed in an era before CGI, because now everything is doctored and made absolutely perfect. Even the costumes in a lot of these movies now are CGI'd and not real. So being able to see something that was actually created by human beings, to me, is always great. And to think that you can do a lot of those things without computer graphics is also fun to see, because everything now is all so digital all the time, and you can't escape from it. In a movie like this, these are all very practical effects, and it does look dated, but it also has this really cool look to it that most modern movies just don't have, and they lack entirely.
Richard Leal, could you see this movie or a version of this? Could you see this as a play?
100% I could.
Yeah.
Absolutely I could. I actually felt in the beginning, when they're in the opera house, I actually felt like I was there. I felt that I was there. Now I was a danseur in the ballet, and we opened always at this little, it's on Route 66 in Miami, Oklahoma. The Coleman Theater was built in the 1920s. And inside, it looks like a Parisian opera house. So you have all of the gilding and the Rococo and the stagecraft. It really, this film sucked me right in just because my love of the theater and the opera and the art and real acting. I just love it so much. I cannot express. I guess I told how I vote. I'm voting. I love this so much.
But this is also a movie that was shot like on stages, right? This wasn't shot on location, and you can see that sometimes, but I also like being able to see it sometimes because it plays more into my imagination of, we created this crazy little world for you all to watch and get to play in the sandbox for a little while, instead of, we went to this real place and this is going to be exactly perfect and it's going to look this way. Like seeing somebody's really crappy take on the moon is fun, because it's not what I expected the moon to look like at all.
No, but there's that wonderful moment, like, again, it's this like fantasy versus reality bit where they're trapped on the moon for a significant portion of the movie, and then they climb down a braid of hair to get back to the earth, roughly speaking. And but they're climbing up sort of Diana's bow. Right, it's not the entirety of the moon; it's this slice of the moon that we would see in the night sky. And then they sort of get up to the tip of the moon, and then tie the hair braid rope around the top of the moon and anchor it, and then down they go. It's absurd, but it also plays into, again, think of the time. What was the moon made out of in the 1780s? It was made of cheese, or
clearly cheese,
real, right? Yeah,
clearly cheese.
So
I would have eaten it.
I love that playback to the absurd and the analog. I think it's great.
I think for me too, I don't know if it's just like, we all know I have very strange tastes in movies, and I didn't say bad, I said strange, and I have very specific things that I like or dislike in movies. And I feel like, as a theater kid myself, if I had seen this story, which I had never heard before, but if I had seen this on stage versus as a film, I think I would have been able to follow it better, because of all of those things, like because of like sitting there and trying to work out how they were doing the different things in front of you, like, or whatever, would have kept my attention differently than trying to watch it as a film where it's not pigeonholing itself into my opinion of what a good film is.
Yeah.
Or what an enjoyable film is. So I think I would have loved to see it as a stage performance.
There are many different versions that one can watch as far as production values. They all share a lot of the same things. I've mentioned it before. One of the earliest surviving is 1909 Georges Méliès, who was famous, of course, for his earlier, was it 1902, H.G. Wells' A Trip to the Moon. So it still has that same fantastical quirkiness to it, but there are stage versions that have existed. He's not so popular these days, unfortunately. The Baron is not so popular. However, as we approach the quarter of the hour, Ms. Courtney Buckley, do you have any quotes that you would like?
I do. I took some. I had to cheat this week. I'm so sorry, but I took some myself, and then I looked some up so that I could be a little bit more prepared. Bear with me. Hold on. Let me get them up. I was screaming out loud when they were singing the song "A Eunuch's Life is Hard," and then at the end they were like, "A eunuch's life is hard and nothing else," and I was thrilled. And then when he said, "Go away, I'm trying to die," I was like, "Wow, I want that tattooed across my forehead." Let me see here. Sorry, I'm unprepared. I didn't have everything up. Have you any famous last words? Not yet. Not yet. Is that famous? Your reality stirs lies in balderdash, and I'm delighted to say that I have no grasp of it whatsoever. Are you all right? Am I dead? No. Blast! Let's see. I have learned from experience that a modicum of snuff can be most efficacious. And that was the only one that, oh my goodness, and that was only one of the many occasions on which I met my death, an experience which I don't hesitate strongly to recommend. Gentlemen, do you think it would be a good idea to silence those enemy cannons? No, sir. No, it's Wednesday. And here we are today. It's Wednesday. I had one other one that I highlighted. Hold on. You're not here. Where are you? Where? You're with the Baron. You're with that little man. You told me size don't make a difference.
Yes.
What about the virgins? Please forget the virgins. We're out of virgins. And my last one is, you look different, younger. I always feel rejuvenated by a touch of adventure. For heaven's sake, don't you get any younger or I'll have to find a wet nurse.
And you know what? I really wish you could have seen, Courtney, when the Sultan comes in, he's meeting with the Baron. And the Baron says, I tell you what, this wine is okay. It's good, but I bet you that within the hour, I can get better wine. And if I don't within the hour, you can cut off my head. And what are you going to give, Sultan? And he says, well, fine. If you can, if it's not better than my wine, you can take anything the strongest man can carry from the treasury. So he says, this makes me laugh. The Sultan comes in with this organ, and he's composed this opera, The Torturer's Apprentice. And inside the organ are his prisoners, and he'll pull a lever and it'll hit someone, or he'll push a button and it'll poke someone, and they're going ooh ah ee, ooh ooh. And the Sultan asks the Baron, he says, would you care to hear my opera? And the Baron says, not really. Okay, good then.
I think this might make a really great musical, even more
I
than
think it
play.
could.
Yeah.
There's
Like a
already couple
Spamalot
of
style.
musical
Yeah.
interludes. And
Yeah,
it's really
I always
good.
think musicals are very good from going one segment to another, because that's what songs do. And that's what this movie is, one segment to another. And
Yeah.
you could kind of cut down on some of the long extended scenes like the moon that go on for an entire moon cycle,
Yeah.
right? And kind of make it a little snappier.
Can
Slows it down.
I give my favorite quote, and then can I do two more of Heather's 5 things?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So my favorite quote is very near the end of the movie, and it's just, I love this because it's just sweet. I actually think it's a sweet quote. So at the end, on the stage, when the play has wrapped up, the Baron says, and everybody who had a talent for it lived happily ever after. And I rather like that. I like having a talent for living happily ever after. So, all right, the Heather things. The girl that played Sally, remind me of her name. The girl that played Sally.
Sarah Polley.
Yes. She was traumatized, it is said, by the movie. Yes, that one.
Yes.
Because she spent hours and hours and hours in freezing cold water being sort of shoved around by these, antiquated men. And she said she was quite traumatized for it for many years to come. So there's an interesting thing. And we've shown a picture of Robin Williams, who has a disembodied head as the King of the Moon there. Two things about that. One, Robin Williams is actually not in the movie. I believe the actor that is listed is something like Ray Donato, because they didn't want to use Robin Williams' name in the movie because people might think it was a Robin Williams movie. So he's uncredited in the movie, but I think the actor's name is like Ray Nato or something like that. So somebody can look that up.
Ray D. Tutto.
There you go.
Yeah, D. Tutto. And when I was watching the movie and I was watching the credits, because there are famous people in a lot of these movies, and you kind of miss them a lot. And I kept waiting to see Robin Williams' name, and I was like, he'd already been on Mork and Mindy. He's pretty famous by this point. Why isn't he being listed along with the other actors in this film? Yeah, it's really kind of strange and discerning. And because I had to watch the credits because I was like, is that Sting? Because Sting is really only on for 90 seconds. And like, I'm 100% sure it's Sting. But at the same time, it's Sting and he's only on for 90 seconds. Like, what's the point of that, right?
Yeah.
I loved when the Queen of the Moon has beheaded herself to meet the Baron in the cage, and she's got the key in her mouth, and she's going, woo, woo, woo. And Sally asks, why is she making those noises? And the Baron gets rather uncomfortable, and he says, her body is with the king. He's tickling her feet.
And he turned out that he was tickling her feet.
Yeah, but
he certainly was. She certainly was not sitting on a deck, I'll tell you that.
That's true. But he ends up saying, the Moon King ends up saying, the Robin Williams character says, I'm free at one point when because his head sort of screws off of his body, right? And he goes, I'm free. I no longer have to deal with orgasms and body functions and all of this kind of stuff. And it's really fascinating. And again, going back to the social commentary for a moment, because that's where my brain goes. Again, the age of reason, where the head was supreme, separated from the carnal, filthy stuff of life, which is, of course, what makes life so wonderful, right?
But he was much nicer when his head was separated, though.
Right.
Like, he didn't want to kill the Baron so badly.
Right.
Because the Baron was a threat, because the Baron got all the chicks, obviously.
Clearly. Lovely ladies.
Have you seen that guy? That dude is hot.
I mean,
Richard Lale, you're much prettier than the Baron.
That
much prettier. much prettier.
Speaking
One's up for that, if you know what I mean.
Mr. Jason Mankey, do you have a Mankey movie minute?
I think I have something. You know, these get harder and harder to do all the time, I feel like. But so I, Baron Munchausen, am here to tell you all my story. I realize that other people have been telling my story over the last year, but they have been telling it all wrong. Let me take you back to a time 1 year ago when the Witches Movie Coven was about to be canceled. The barbarians were at the gate, ready to put us out to pasture, but I single-handedly saved our entire show. I know Courtney Buckley and Richard Lale Lillard claim they were our saviors, but it was me. It was all me. Not even the ghosts were listening to Patty Negri a year ago. It was all on my very narrow shoulders, and I won. So let me tell you how the powers that be were complaining about our ratings. Not enough people were watching the show, they screamed at us. So I, in our moment of great need, gathered the knickers of every willing woman and man who watches our show and stitched them together and infused them with the hottest of air so they might fly, and created the Mankey Movie Minute, the highest rated portion of our show. And now, with the Mankey Minute flying high up in the air, I did what any sane and rational Baron Munchausen might do. I let my balloon of hot air drift up to the moon. There upon the moon I met a disembodied head who was not just king of the moon, but king of most of the universe. And while he hated me, his wife was clearly in love with me, because why not? The king of the moon is bald, while I have the world's prettiest curly blonde hair. Suddenly, with a wink of her moon powers, we were streaming on Instagram, Facebook, the service formerly known as Twitter, and a dozen more. People would gaze at me on the show and become enchanted. But the king of the moon was jealous of my blonde locks, and he sent me crashing back down to the earth, where I met Aphrodite herself. The goddess, despite being married, threw herself at me. Baron Munchausen, she sighed into my ear. I want you to ride in this clamshell with me. And I replied with, Only if you ensure that the Witches Movie Coven shall meet many, many more times going forward. She nodded, and our ratings in the coveted 18 to 49 demographic increased 69%. So my quest completed, I circled back to the world of Restream with hundreds more viewers in my pocket. The show had been saved, and we are here tonight due to my daring and dashing deeds. And now I shall prepare for the hex Courtney Buckley will inevitably throw at me.
Yay! No hexing today. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So
Not yet, at least.
we should vote. I know how Patty is going to vote. She is not here, but Patty loves this movie, so I'm going to say Patty loves this movie. Patty votes up. I vote up. Where do you vote? Jason Menke, turn your light off. So we have ones up, ones up, ones up. We have Jason at a neutral. Do we have anyone in the credits, in the content? Anyone?
I would just like to explain my ones up because I didn't watch it fully, obviously, but I'm ones up for the quotes because they were funny and because I love Richard Lale so much. And watching you talk about it and how shiny your eyes get, I have to give it a ones up.
I love this movie. It's one of my go-tos forever and ever and ever and ever. I'll vote neutral with Jason. Turn your light off. One's neutral. Heather Green is neutral. Heather Green is not here, so I'm going to say Heather Green is voting up.
Heather Green voted neutral in the comments.
I know, but she's not here. So now, because I am the Baron.
Oh, now hold on.
She is a dear lady, and dear ladies always vote up.
I'm voting for Heather, Black Phillip's auntie. She voted neutral.
I understand why people love this movie, but I don't know, like it just moves at a very weird pace, and it was hard to get into because of that. So for me, it's a little too bonkers, you know. And I don't have the memories of watching it as a kid like I do with Time Bandits.
My suggestion is read the book. It's different. The book is different. The book actually is. It does take you on an adventure, and I mean, when he goes into talking about the seashell that drags across the earth and creates the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's crazy. It's the 18th century, and I love it. And I especially love it because of his remorse. When you find out that in the end of the book, he's told all of these tall tales because he feels incredibly guilty about the beheading of Louis and Marie Antoinette. That it's so human that it always gets me right in the heart. It always gets me. With that, we have like 2 minutes left. So, where can we find you, Gwion? You are our guest of honor today. Where can we find you?
Most of the social media places you might expect. If you just type in Gwion Raven, I'll invariably pop up. Not actually wherever you are, but on the screen.
That'll be something.
Gwion is there.
I was going to try it.
If Jason types in my name, I do frequently pop up in Sunnyvale, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, you can find me at Gwion Raven, or you can find me at The Witches Next Door, which is both a podcast and a website that my amazing partner Phoenix LaFay is also part of. So you can find us at The Witches Next Door, or me at just Gwion Raven anywhere.
Jason Menke.
Gwion and I are going to LA in 2 weeks, so you can find us like wandering around LA in 2 weeks. You can find me online. There's another Jason Menke. He's a minister. Go easy on him. His life sucks because his congregation is pretty sure he's a witch, and I think that's great.
Ms. Courtney Buckley.
That's me. I am at the Themes everywhere. And Ghostbait on Scared and Alone, so you check that out. Also, Robert Hicks asked what's next week's movie, and I am thrilled. Yeah, thrilled to announce that it is Late Night with the Devil. I have a lot of things to say. A lot of things to say.
Not that I've voted yet.
Also, no witches in that, but there is Satanic Panic.
And also, shout out to Icarus Witch, the band that I'm wearing tonight. Heavy metal band, very much witches. They're great.
Joan Jett.
Joan Jett is great too.
Baron Munchausen.
What would Gerald
What
do?
would Gerald do?
I like it.
Oh,
And I am really easy to be found. I am at the Gentleman Psychic, gentlemanpsychic.com. I'm, Richard Lillard. Anyway, I'm everywhere. I am everywhere next week, Late Night with the Devil. And with that, we have one more thing to do as we just go over the hour. What do witches do? They cackle. And so, since there were no witches in this film, we are not going to cackle. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to cackle. We are going to cackle. We are really